Hello and welcome. This podcast, Mediator Musings, is produced by Mediation Institute. It's for mediators, by mediators, and other professionals who provide support and services to the mediation industry. I hope you enjoy this chat with Sylvia Garibaldi. Hello, welcome everyone. Today I'm speaking with Sylvia Garibaldi. She's the founder and CEO of SG and Associates. Sylvia isn't a mediator. What she does is she specialises in helping service-based professionals to build their brand and be seen as leaders of their space. Primarily, you're working with financial, mediation and divorce experts. Is that right, Sylvia?
Yes, that's correct. And thank you so much for having me here, Joanne. I'm super excited.
Oh, you're welcome. And really, the reason I invited you is I've just recently participated in a program you ran, a program which you did for free that was just amazing and really, really valuable. And I know some of the other members who attended also found it really valuable. So I wanted to thank you for that. And for me, it was an example of what you're promoting about really giving value to people up front so they develop that know, like, and trust.
Yes, that's such an excellent point. And thank you for that. I appreciate the shout out there. Definitely, I think the key factor in building any business, but particularly in the mediation and financial spaces and legal spaces, when you're selling a service, it's all about demonstrating value first before people buy, because they really can't see, feel, or touch what we're selling, right? So we have to give them that experience first before they engage in our service. And I think that's so important for the mediation space as well, to be able to, to educate people first in a way that builds the know, like, and trust factor.
Oh, absolutely. And particularly for our industry, because it is so confidential and private, it's a little bit of a secret thing that happens and people can't attend a mediation other than if they're attending a mediation or supporting someone. So it's a really good point. So how did you end up here? How did you end up in this niche? What brought you to working in this area?
Yeah, that's a great question. I started a very long time ago. I started SG and Associates probably 14 years ago, but my background is in corporate, primarily in the financial services industry and always in the marketing space. And so as I was doing a lot of building brands for this big, large financial institution, I really started to come to realize the need for a more important role that marketing plays in terms of helping the sales force or people that are solopreneurs really learn to use marketing to promote their services and what they do in a way that builds the know, like, and trust factor. So I went out on my own and started out working with financial advisors primarily first, and helped them build their profile, grow their business by really learning teaching them how to connect with their audience and how to promote their practices.
Yeah.
Because there's something I find that every time any service can be complex, and particularly in the mediation space, in the financial space, in the legal spaces, it's very difficult to understand some of the ideas that you're trying to sell and that the public is trying to grasp, because they're usually in a situation where it's a technical kind of expertise. And when you have that kind of technical expertise, it doesn't always translate into easy marketing. And that's the gap that I found in the marketplace, is that a lot of these professionals, unfortunately, didn't know how to promote themselves or promote their businesses and educate people first about the important work that they do and get people interested in the work that they do. That was a big finding for me, is to discover that gap. First, it was a skill set gap. And then the second thing I discovered was, I don't know if you want to call it a confidence gap, but there's this thing about how a lot of these professionals feel they need to hide or not be visible because they don't want to be salesy, or they don't want to be seen as overselling their service. Fortunately, I believe that there is a happy balance there that needs to take place, because if it doesn't, then A lot of people don't know that your service exists or that you exist as a solopreneur and as a brand that can actually change their life. And that's one of the key things I see with mediation as such an important service. And yet it's not really promoted enough so that people understand it and how it can transform their life or their business.
Oh, absolutely. Like in our industry, there's government funded services and then there's private practitioners. But I'm still coming across lawyers that don't actually realise there's the private practitioners. The private practitioners are available, and even in their local area for that lawyer, whoever's there, because there will be mediators there, they're just not making themselves known, even to the most likely referrers. And I'd imagine to the community, the people that would, be thinking about mediation first rather than, we'll have to go to court because we can't resolve this.
Right. Yeah, that's a really excellent point that you bring up about the private practice versus the government funded and the options. Like, it's our responsibility as service providers and experts to give the options available to people so that they understand what's out there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I always like to give an example or the analogy of a specialist doctor who has a very special way of healing people or experiencing a very unique disease of some kind. And yet people don't know that his or her service exists. And so if you don't know that this service exists, what a disservice it's doing to the people who actually need that service. And I just use that as an example to really highlight the importance of making sure that people are aware of this service out there and how it can actually help them, because it would be devastating for someone to not know that this type of doctor existed and could actually heal them if this doctor didn't share, or because they had a very unique service or unique specialty and people just didn't know about it. And that could be a life-altering thing. And I believe that's the same thing with very important services such as mediation, about the power of mediation and how it can help people or businesses.
Absolutely. And a lot of mediators work in really special little areas as well. Like, one of the things that we train is relationship mediation. So that's for people that, it might be a brother and sister that have had a falling out over the will or something. That's been resolved, but now Christmas dinner doesn't happen anymore. And that's a tragedy for a family and for the future generations. Or it can be a couple that are at the edge of divorce but don't want to, standing on the precipice. But most people haven't even heard of that. They haven't even heard that there's a way to renegotiate your relationship and get past. So.
I love that example, Joanne. That's an amazing one to share with people. You're absolutely right, it's not out there. People don't know of the different varieties.
Absolutely. They all know about relationship counselling. However, it isn't the process for everyone, or they've tried it. And I suppose that point as well, people might have had mediation with one person, but they have a totally different style to someone else. And so they think that's mediation. I've been there, tried that, done that. And so with marketing, I guess it's a way for mediators to not be a commodity. There's many of us, we're all different.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So is that the sort of thing you help people with, to not be a commodity?
Yeah. So I think the key factor is the first thing we look at is always lead by education first. You can be promoting your services in a way that educates people first and spreads the word about the different scenarios, sharing client stories, sharing situations that will allow people to envision what mediation can do. So when we work with clients, we teach them how to find those places to spread their message. And that could be an in-person presentation. It could be a virtual stage, speaking on the virtual stages of others, to really educate their audiences first, where they know their ideal target market hangs out. And so super, super important to be able to really, there's a couple key things here. One is really getting clear on your message that resonates with your ideal target audience, and then taking that message and then amplifying it.
Yeah.
And you want to amplify it in the places where your ideal market could hear you, find you, see you, learn from you. We've got a really special way of making sure that that's all wrapped up so that when you're actually out there, you're spreading the right message that resonates with your ideal target audience, that obviously deals with their pain points or things that they struggle with, and really helping to convey the message that you could be the gateway to their solution by way of your service as a mediator. But people don't know that unless you are visible. You need to be out there, increasing your visibility, speaking and being accessible to people so that they can learn about you and your services. And then that basically increases the know, like, and trust factor. So there's so many different ways from an online perspective. There are many ways to do that. The basic way is the social media way of sharing stories and posting content, very valuable content. And then there's also just getting on the stages of others. So maybe you're a guest on a podcast, or maybe you're speaking, delivering a webinar to a group or association or a company where your ideal target market hangs out. So just looking at the places where you can become visible consistently. So people can learn from you consistently.
Yeah. Wow. There's so much knowledge there. And one of the things you mentioned a couple of times was ideal target market. When people are starting out, they're often, who's your ideal client? Anyone who'll pay me.
Yeah.
Is that your recommendation?
Yeah. Well, it can get a little complex. As somebody starting out, I think that for all service-based businesses that are starting out, it's incredibly challenging to know who they best serve and who they get the best results for. So sometimes it's starting with who do you think your ideal market is, and then testing it, especially in the initial stages, and then discovering, is this my ideal target market? Am I getting the best results? So, as an example, when I started SG and Associates a while ago, we started with financial advisors and accountants and mutual fund wholesalers. Over the years, we discovered that not only was it this group of professionals, but then it became divorce experts and mediators and therapists. And so it kind of evolved because we just started discovering that these folks needed our service as well, and we got amazing results for them. I think that when you're starting out, you need to be open to the possibility that you may have to test markets to figure out where your ideal market is until you get into a rhythm and you figure out this is this is the best group that I work with. And by the way, it may not have to be you don't have to hone in on a target market per se. You could certainly hone in on a type of service and become a specialist in one type of service or a very tight kind of service that you're offering. So you can target in many ways, right? You can target by target audience, you can target by service. So there's a myriad of ways.
That's really great advice, because sometimes people are worried about that. Like, how do I do that when I've only had a handful of clients? And they came from my, referral from a friend. So.
Exactly. Oh, very excellent point. And I can see how a lot of newbies are seeing it that way, because we've had experience working with people in those scenarios as well. And we know exactly what's going through their headspace when they're thinking about that, and then creates uncertainty, and maybe they start to lose their confidence a little bit because they're so unsure about who do I go after, right? So I say keep an open mind and test and just keep rolling with it, right? I mean, sometimes people end up in target markets they never thought they would have resonated with.
Yeah.
Or maybe they would have, some of them are actually going into more specialty markets, and it's not so much who the target market is as the specialty service. So
yeah, look, absolutely. And sometimes it relates to people's own life experience. If you've got a disabled child, you've, through necessity, have developed a huge body of knowledge about their specialist needs. And so working with families that are separating with children with that type of disability would be hugely valuable for clients.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Compared to a mediator who has a vague idea.
Yeah. And that's an excellent example of targeting by specialty as opposed to target audience.
Yeah.
So that's a great example that you just shared. Absolutely. That demonstrates that.
Yeah. And something else you said is about us being like a gateway, and it brought up for me a little mental image of people lost in a fog of confusion, because often people that come to mediators, they're either really anxious, very frustrated. Often they feel powerless because the other side won't talk to them. If you can't communicate, you have no ability to change things in some ways, or you can go to court and force them at issue, but that's often people either can't afford or don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. That concept of communicating that your service is a gateway to go from that state of anxiety or powerlessness to, actual momentum. is that the sort of thing that you were talking about, like you were meaning in that communication?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's from the state of where they are now to where they want to go. And where they want to go is their ideal state. And so the gap to get to that ideal state is your mediation service. So where they are now and where they want to go, they need to take that gateway of mediation, if you will, to get to that solution that's going to satisfy their ideal state that they've outlined for you.
So we open the gate and we guide them down the path that'll lead to, out of all the possible futures, the one that they'd like.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. Yeah. Absolutely.
I guess that's the thing. All of our members, all of mediators, they're thinking people, they work professionally, they have a good skill set. And so working with someone, with a marketer, someone like you to, I suppose, spark those ideas. I've written that one down. I'm going to use that. Yeah. And that's just sparked from our conversation. It could be quite an emotive, resonating type concept for someone who's in that fog of confusion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more there.
It's amazing. I noticed that you talk a fair bit about online marketing, and I suppose that's the way it is now. What's your thoughts about that? Because in your career, then you must have seen a real transition, I'd imagine.
Yes, definitely. The transition was more from in-person marketing, networking, to, of course, the global health crisis really moved us into online and in a hurry because of the lack of in-person communication, lack of in-person presentations, seeing people in person, doing business in person. But I think online we've always been engaged in online, and that's one of the first places we move our clients to, is to make sure that they have an online presence. And I'm not talking like website, I'm talking more about being able to spread their message about what they do from an online perspective, and then bring those online prospects and move them offline so that you're actually converting them into like an in-person meeting or a video meeting to actually meet them that way. But I think the key with online is that it will always play a key factor, or it's always going to be a key component of your marketing plan. Even if things just change completely and we were just 100% in person, which at this stage, it's different for where everyone lives. But I think that the online portion needs to be a very important factor in your marketing plan to build visibility because of the power of internet, plain and simple. Everybody knows that's pretty common knowledge. But I think the way you use it as a mediator can work incredibly well when you're working it to actually build the know, like, and trust factor with your ideal markets. Yeah. And your ideal markets can be, as we talked about, your specialty or your target market, but also how to influence what we call your influencers or your referral partners to make sure that you're connecting with them as well. So from an online perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess being seen as a resource or someone that could be reached out to, is that something you encourage people?
To be seen as a resource or a leader?
Yeah, for potential referral partners.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, especially in the field of mediation. Well, a lot of service-based businesses, you've got to have two kinds of streams of incoming interest, and the incoming interest coming in from a marketing perspective should be from your end clients themselves or end ideal prospects, And then also from those referral partners. So we need to make sure that we're reaching out to those referral partners from an online perspective and educating them as well.
Yeah.
Because they can play a key role in helping you bring in new business.
Absolutely. I do need to disclose to everyone, I have been talking to Sylvia about potentially doing some more work, looking to overcome a couple of problems that people often have. One, price, investing in educating themselves about how to market their business. And I think the other, almost as important, is accountability. We've all got books on our shelves that we haven't opened. We've all got programs that we quit out of. So what we're talking about is a group program where working with Sylvia and her team over a period of time, but also with a group of other mediators so that you can hopefully hold each other accountable and bounce off each other and that sort of thing. So we do want to talk a little bit more about where we're at. We haven't got this finalised. We will share information once we have, but
well, one of the key things that we know in terms of accountability is consistency. And so this is why we've specifically created a 6-month group training program for mediators, which is super exciting because of the fact that they can work together and access really marketing materials that will help them build their profile as a mediator and bring in more consistent business. And so the program, that the 6-month group training program that we're referring to, is called the Serve First and Sell to Many online method. And this is really a program that we've honed in and worked on over the years to really get it to a place where it really helps create amazing results for service-based professionals. And this program in particular is going to be just for mediators. And so it's going to be a 6-month group training program that really helps them, mediators, be seen in their space as an expert, build their brand, and grow their practice by incorporating a lot of the online principles that we talked about. And it's one of our signature programs that we know gets our clients results very quickly. And so it's also about how do you do this from an online perspective when you look at how to build relationships online with your ideal prospects. So as mediators, if you're relying on referrals or word of mouth referrals to build your practice, those can dry out eventually, right? And so I'm not saying don't use them, but it can't be your only strategy in growing your mediation practice. And we see that a lot with mediators, that they rely on those word of mouth referrals, but they really need to be out there building those online relationships with their ideal prospects and referral partners, and then bring them over so that they can actually have a conversation with them as they would as if they met someone at a networking event in person, and then set up a meeting to start a conversation about whether in fact there could be some synergies there, or whether they need your service as a mediator. It's all about how to focus in on those opportunities. And that's what we're going to be teaching in this program, is how to find and approach virtual speaking opportunities to spread the word and build your brand as a mediator. And also how to use social media to really build yourself up in that space, so that know, like, and trust factor converts into new business for you. And so super excited.
Yeah, and that's really important, because I've still got a lot of seeing a lot of mediators who have really got a cringe factor around social media, and worried about, I don't know, things I don't think you need to be worried about, guys. So for example, I use LinkedIn a lot to build my personal profile, and that's where we met originally.
Yes.
From LinkedIn and a connection there. But not the dreadful people who you connect and the next thing you know, you've got a message there saying, buy my thing. That's not what you promote, is it?
No, absolutely not. So we're teaching the opposite of that. We're teaching how to build authentic relationships without selling first. And so this is why it's called the Serve First and Sell to Many method, because it's about building authentic relationships first in a way that creates value and then allows them to inquire about what you do, right? So it's all, there's a process to follow, and works incredibly well when you practice the system and you know how to use it. And that's what the 6-month program is all about, is the teaching and the implementation, and then getting the feedback, the real-time results on how to improve it, because everything needs to be customizable to everyone's situation. As you mentioned, Joanne, we each have our own strengths. And so you have to be able to customize that to your strength, to your business and whatnot.
Absolutely. And I guess the reason that I'm interested in working with you on this is that I'm really, I suppose, really focused on people developing skills. And you have to practice to develop skills.
100%.
The gap between knowing and doing.
Absolutely. And I'm sure because you're in the mediation training space, you see it, you understand it. And 100%. And we've seen it too over the course of our business. We have seen how short programs don't work. Because they're not building the skill set, which is a muscle that you build with repetition over and over again. And it resonates with you, it stays with you longer. And so you're actually leaving with such a powerful set of skills.
It just becomes who you are. This is how you think, this is how you interact.
Absolutely.
So rather than seeing people as prospects and just thinking about what they can buy from you, you're interested in them, you're wanting to find out, is there, as you said, is there a synergy? Is the time right for you to be able to help them? But even if it's not, they now know what you do and they've got friends.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
And if you're in the divorce mediation space like I am, usually there's some ages and stages in people's lives where it's more likely that they're thinking about separating, the empty nesters, often the young primary school families, and so on. So it's never, I guess it's never wasted forming a relationship with or forming a connection. It's not so much a relationship, it's a connection by having that. I call them dispute diagnostics. So, help people to understand a little bit more about what's going on and what their options are. One of them.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point. We always teach our clients that people buy on their own timelines, not on our timelines. Yes. So, your point about people come to you at different stages in their separation or divorce, especially in divorce mediation. That's why we're big believers in making sure that you're building up that prospecting pipeline, because the people who do come to see you, you may have a group of people who aren't ready to buy quite yet.
Yeah.
So if you were relying on those 1 or 2 prospects, you'd be in big trouble because you haven't built that pipeline through social media, through speaking on those virtual stages, because people are going to come to you at different stages in their cycle of assistance that they're going to need from you. And so if you have 2 people in your prospecting pipeline and both of them are just at the initial stages and are not ready to make a decision yet, guess what? You're in trouble. So build that pipeline, bring them in, because you're absolutely right. They're all going to be at different stages.
Oh, absolutely. That applies with Mediation Institute. So we train mediators, and I'll often have someone say, I spoke to you 18 months ago. I'm ready to start now. It's quite common for that. I have a newsletter once a month that goes out. After that, there's generally a few calls. I suppose that's the consistency you talk about. And if people are using social media, being consistently visible. So when they are ready, they remember.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's another key factor why that visibility and not hiding is going to be key to building that pipeline over time, because the number of attempts and the number of times people have to see you, read from you, hear from you keeps going up from a marketing perspective. I don't know if we're at like 10 to 12 touches now or 10 to 16 touches before communication touches before people will want to reach out to you. So think about the importance of being visible to build that prospecting pipeline.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because that's often another fear that people like mediators have, that, I don't want to bother them. I don't want to be, I don't want to be annoying. But I think the reality is people just don't see stuff they don't want. It's so noisy. You pretty much don't see stuff that you're not looking for anymore.
So true. And that is one of the common things we see a lot, is that kind of mindset not only mediators, but a lot of other service-based professionals that come forward and say, well, I don't want to be a nuisance, or, maybe I shouldn't be out there posting again this week or today, or maybe I shouldn't be as visible because of that fear of being seen as salesy. But you bring up an excellent point again, Joanne, where you say people are not reading and seeing from you and learning from you all the time. They may not just be looking. It's so important to make sure that you are not only out there often and consistent, but also sharing the same message over and over again, so that you become known for something that resonates with your audience, and so that they understand over time what you do, and that's going to be really critical.
Absolutely. And I think you need to be reminded and told that, because individually we might feel like, oh, I'm bored, I'm doing the same thing over there again, and I need to change it up. I need to be, well, do you really?
Totally agree. And that's another mindset belief that a lot of mediators have, thinking, oh my gosh, I already said that. Should I be saying it again? Well, yeah. So just imagine how many times you need to tell your child the same thing in many different ways before they actually get it, right? And I'm just trying to really highlight a point that you need to really, repeat. And you can say it in different ways to position it so that people understand, but it will resonate so much more powerfully with people when there's a consistency in messaging.
Yeah, and that's where you identify what it is that you offer, and you make that into a clear, repeated often message that you get out there. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just aware of time, and we can keep chatting away, because what I really like and why I'm excited about working with you is the fact that you're focusing on mindset as much as the action. I suppose so that people are doing things authentically.
I'll tell you something. I learned this a very long time ago. When I first started my practice, I had so many clients in at different stages in their businesses. And one of the things I discovered was I couldn't figure out why was it that some folks were doing really well and then others maybe not as well. When I looked at when we started our practice, what it looked like in the initial stages, we didn't have mindset training built in when we first started SG and Associates over 14 years ago. And we started to realize that has to be a key component of what we teach. And there's strategy and there's mindset. If you ever teach strategy without mindset, you're in for a real shock of lack of results, because strategy is everywhere. And so making sure that the strategy lines up with your beliefs and the mindset behind it and the confidence behind it is a formula for success. Like, that's just a recipe for success when you put those two together, strategy and mindset. And that's exactly what we teach.
Absolutely. And I know that with your individual programs, you do a lot more, I suppose, individual mindset coaching and that sort of thing. And what I've talked to you about is that people can purchase some individual time if they need it. So some of us have, got quite a few little time bombs laid down by life experiences that can get in the way of momentum. Is that your experience? Like, people come up against, they're going great, and then they come up against something that they sort of sabotage their
self-sabotaging because there's a lot of self-sabotaging thoughts that come in when they start to implement a strategy. And one of them could be, oh, I've done this already, didn't work. If I had so many people just say that over and over again. Oh my gosh, I tried that, that didn't work. Or I don't think I'm suited to do that, or that's just not, I can't accomplish that.
I'm not all those identity things. I'm not whatever you want to fill in.
Exactly. And with the program that we're going to be putting on for the Mediation Institute, it's all about, there will be some mindset training in the group training calls as well, right? So it's like setting people up for success. Not only is it strategy, but it's group, it's mindset as well. And we'll be touching on both of those, even though it's a group program, but there's still a lot of mindset training that people learn from each other. And so we do a combination of that.
Yeah, and that's important. One of the challenges some of our members have is that imposter syndrome. We're some of, like, quite a lot of our students and members are legally trained or have other qualifications. What we really want is to make sure that mediators are more representative of their communities as well. So we have a lot of mediators we're training who come from very diverse backgrounds, and that's great. And I think a huge value, that they can bring. That whole piece around cultural safety and people feeling okay to be who they are and not try and pretend to be someone else.
Yeah.
You don't have to be within a narrow framework to be a brilliant mediator. And
absolutely. Yep. 100%.
Yeah. And so I think that's going to be something really strong that we can bring through in a program of helping people to be okay, to be
them. Yes.
It's so much
to be
easier.
Uniquely them. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, so there's so many different syndromes that, as you mentioned, come up, but I think that where people will have most success is when they take the strategy, they use the mindset, and then they apply it to them and their specialty and their own skill sets and their own strengths, and just be them, as opposed to being others in their field who maybe are more successful than them, and they're trying to emulate them. And that usually just doesn't work, right? It's got to be authentically you with your own combination of skill sets, because I think everyone is special, unique, and different. And there's so many of us that do the same thing, that have the same profession, but we don't all do it the same way. Right. Yeah. We bring our own perspective to it. Yes, maybe the process is the same, but not, there's so many different nuances that, like, why does someone purchase from one mediator versus the other? They have the same skill sets, they offer the same service. So maybe it's your process, maybe it's how your team works with you and brings them in and onboards them. Like, there's so many different ways that your service and you can be unique.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I run a not-for-profit, and I often have the conversation with people, and then I try and hand them off to someone else, and they say, no, but I want to work with you. And I say, but they're very good. No,
yes.
And we want our clients saying, I really want to work with you. I don't want to work with someone else.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I was going to ask for final points, but I think that point you just made of strategy plus mindset, and then making it uniquely yours and authentic, that's fabulous final point for anyone. Have you got anything you want to top that with? Or?
Yeah, well, actually, when you bring that all together, I'd agree. Like, that really kind of summarizes things really well. If you can bring all those things together, then and it's not always an easy thing to do or a straightforward path. No. But that really is the overall arching formula that I think a lot of people use. And that's certainly what we teach in our program, to achieve success and to use the systems that are going to get you where you want to go in a way that feels authentic and feels uniquely yours.
Beautiful. That's wonderful. So look, thank you so much for your time, Sylvia. As always, it's a pleasure chatting with you. I'm really looking forward to working with you. For those that are listening, we'll put some flesh on the bones of what we've been discussing about this group program and let you know as soon as we can when we'll start.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm super excited about that. I think people are going to see a lot of value in this program. And they'll be super excited to be able to see where their practices can go once they start implementing some of these strategies. So super excited to work with you, Joanne. And as always, thank you so much for your time. And I'm honored to be a guest on your podcast.
Thank you very much.